And we know that the change is always there. And whenever there's a change, that means there is also death. So from birth to death, whatever changes we see, that comes under the developmental psychology. Generally, when we talk about the developmental psychology, we talk about concepts like growth, development, and maturation. Now, although they seem similar, we know that there are differences between the terms growth and development. Development, of course, involves growth, but then growth is only a quantitative addition. For example, when we say a person is growing, we talk about the increase in the size or the weight or the height, or also proportion of the body parts, or the appearance of different limbs or other things, growth of hair, growth of the limbs, etc. But then development involves both the growth as well as other qualitative changes. For example, we talk about development due to maturation or emotional development or moral development. Here, it is more than a quantitative change. We know that when a person grows or matures, it may also lead to development. The genes, what we contain, also help in growing in an orderly and a predetermined manner. And the growth is always accompanied by a biological clock. That is, like we have a clock inside our body, which actually tries to monitor what is happening in the body. For example, when you get up in the morning and sleep in the night, that is due to the biological clock. Similarly, the biological clock essentially tries to see how the cells are growing, how it grows, what time you get up, how your body is internally regulated, etc. Now, this biological clock is determines your growth. Whereas your falling of milk teeth, graying of your hair, or a child starts to walk, all these are due to the bodily changes during childhood and adolescence. And we know that the changes also occur when we try to think or how we feel. These are also changes, but these are called as development. Therefore, development essentially also means the growth of certain things, but growth does not incorporate development. So we have a predetermined life because our genes actually tell how far your body grows. The genes determine your eye color, your growth patterns, your hair, the way you walk. All these things are determined by the genes. At the same time, the heredity, besides the heredity, you also have the environment, which also tries to determine how you study, how you grow, how you interact with other people, how you develop your emotions, etc. Therefore, both growth and development together lead to the development, or the whole lifespan is covered by these two aspects. Now, what is maturation? Maturation is determined by genes, that is how much you grow. Whereas the learning occurs in an environment. So maturation and learning together, they try to determine your development. So I can say again, the bodily growth or the maturation, as well as our experiences in our environment or our living or our interactions with others, or how we try to develop our interactions with others, all these interactions, that is environmental interactions, along with the maturation aspects, that is how you grow, that is genetical, both that is genetical as well as environmental factors determine the development of a human being. Now, people, of course, they use these terms very much interchangeably. That is, they think growth is development, but we as psychology students know that the growth does not involve development, and development includes growth. Now, change is the law of the nature. We know that all the things change as time passes. At the same time, we also know that the human beings, when the life starts, he's at one stage, but gradually as he develops both bodily as well as he also develops both mental capacities and emotional capacities. We know that a child, when he is conceived, he is in the mother's womb. That is, the ovum is fertilized with the sperm and then becomes the male or female child. And we know that the growth occurs right from that stage. The period spent in the mother's womb is known as the prenatal period, that is before birth. And it is also included when one actually is trying to compute the age of a person. For example, like you have a germinating seed, which actually grows up into a big plant. Likewise, that also involves growth as well as development. Growth in the sense it grows in height and size, and development is the more maturation and other things that happen. Similarly, in the human beings too, we find that right from the stage where it is fertilized egg in the mother's womb, it goes on developing. The human child also gradually grows in both size as well as other aspects. Now we talk about growth. When we talk about growth, we are doing something which is quantitative. What is quantitative? That which can be measured. So growth can be measured. So when we try to see the biological aging, we see that it actually leads to more growth. That is right from the growth. We see growth in the early childhood. We see growth in the adulthood, and we see consolidation of the growth in the adulthood. And when actually the old age or the aging starts, we find the deterioration of the body parts. So change is there all the time. It is how humans cope up with this change that is also important. So developmental psychologists actually help human beings to come into consideration of all these changes and try to accommodate themselves to these changes in the best possible way. Now, when we talk about the concept of development, we are talking both about the biological changes as well as the behavioral changes. Because when human beings pass through certain developmental stages, we call them, through these developmental stages, they also have certain social responsibilities and others fixed on them. And therefore, we see that there is a relatively gradual growth changes occurring in emotional as well as knowledge, learning aspects, and also how they interact and the overall personality development occurring throughout all these changes. So there is a pattern of continuity too. See, when an example, a person is there, a small baby is there, he tries to develop certain personality, and that personality does not radically differ. The personality remains stainless. There is some continuity as well as there is some change. So both the changes that are there in a person as well as the continuities that exist, all these are studied in the developmental psychologies. Now, maturation is generally, it is determined genetically. Maturation does not mean it is in there, some learning is there. Maturation is by the process of genes. If some boy grows into a big adult man, but is there any learning occurring? We do not know. If he is going to a college or a school, then learning occurs. Otherwise, he just matures. So matures is the physical aspect or the biological aspect that changes. That is the changes that are occurring in the brain and the nervous system and the other things. So maturation is when a person matures, he is trying to develop certain changes that are there, which are irrevocably or somehow they are happening because of the genetical aspect of the things and which naturally happen. Whereas the learning, when it happens, when there is a change in behavior, then that is also contributes to the growth and development. So what I mean to say is, maturation is genetical and is normal, and it is a process of the effect of the genes. Whereas learning is imbibed, it is environmentally controlled, and when goes into a school or college there, or whenever he is there in a learning social setting, learning occurs. So when learning and maturation together lead to the development of an individual. So whenever we talk about the development, there are several types of development. We have got the cognitive development, we have got the skill development, we have got the emotional development, we have got the personality development. So there are many other aspects. That is, we have also physical skills developing, skill development. So what we mean to say is, when an individual tries to learn certain things, all these developmental aspects are there. Therefore, development is the whole growth of the personality. The personality development is there. But at the same time, there are developmental stages also. But let us first understand about the principles of development so as to know more about the aspect of development. When we talk about growth, we are talking about the structural and the physiological change. That is, what growth happens in the body or the structure or the physiology of the functioning of the body, that is known as the growth. Whereas development is throughout the life. Growth stops at some point, development does not. Growth, development may also possible without any growth. Sometimes there may be quicker development. Growth is quantitative, whereas development is both quantitative as well as qualitative. Growth takes place because of two processes. One is differentiation and integration. What I mean by this differentiation is when there is cell growth, that means a boy grows because of the bodily growth, isn't it? Now this bodily growth is possible because of cell differentiation. All the cells in the body, they start differentiating and they grow. That is, they multiply and the body becomes huge in size. So along with the growth differentiation, there is also integration that is coming together. And therefore, both these processes, that is cells increasing in size and coming together so as to work in a coordinated manner, thus results in the physical growth of the body. Now, when we talk about the development, there may be a particular pattern. The important aspect of this is the development refers to the changes in the organism as a whole, and development can be actually observed, whereas growth can be measured. Now, we can use these terms interchangeably, but when you understand that development is a continuous process, whereas growth stops at some point, you will be able to understand. For example, you know that the physical manifestation of certain things or certain features may appear to be sudden, and then that is known as growth, whereas development is a continuous process. Development occurs even when you are in old age. Generally, there are certain stages of development given. For example, from conception to birth is known as the prenatal period, as I've been telling earlier. And when a child is born, from the birth to 14 days, that is known as the neonatal period, that is the newborn stage. Also, we have got the babyhood, or from 2 weeks to 2 years, and then early childhood from 2 years to 6 years. The late childhood comes from 6 years to 12 years, and then the child comes to the adolescent stage, where it may range from 12 to 13 years to 16 to 19 years. And the adulthood is from the 18, 19 years onwards to the end of his life. Now, we know that the development follows a certain pattern. For example, when you see a human being, we know that the development is not continuous. It may be there for some time, it may stop, it may develop, it may occur in spurts. Okay, this is a particular pattern. And each individual's development patterns is unique to him. Of course, there are certain common stages of development in all the human beings, but a person, an individual's pattern is specific to himself. Also, we know that the development proceeds from general to specific response. For example, a child, when he tries to react to something, it is a general reaction, but when in an adolescent, you find that there are more stages of shyness, anger, joy, fear, etc. So we see that in early stages of language development also, that a child may use any words for any animal. Any animal he says is an animal, but when he tries to grow up, he uses specific words or terms. Similarly, we see that from general to specific ways, the development occurs. We also know that the development is a product of both heredity and as well as environment. That is, development does not occur by itself. When a person, individual interacts with the environment, he learns something from the environment too. So that we see that the social organizations in which an individual moves is also very important, as they help to make him learn about the aspects of society, the aspects of his individual behavior, and also what role they have to play. Also, as I was saying earlier, every individual is unique by himself. That is, we see that the growth or pattern of development is not common in all human beings. They vary. Some people grow quickly, some people there is quick maturation, and in some individuals there is a somewhat a later stages of maturation seen. The maturation is somewhat slow. So there is uniqueness in individuals. That is why individuals are not all same. Individuals have their own characteristics or specific ways of development. For example, if there is a stimulating environment, then the individuals are more enthusiastic with life, they are more playful, they are more creative, etc. Similarly, encouragement or guidance can also help the students or the small children to grow up much better. They have now that the satisfaction of observing themselves, and they try to grow themselves. They are happy, and also the encouragement and guidance helps them to achieve certain things. So therefore, we say that by genes, it is not growth occurs, of course, but the developmental aspects also include the environmental factors, and therefore development is an interaction between the genes and the environment, between heredity and the environment. The both together combinedly give rise to this developmental aspects of the individual. Also, when we talk about these things, we also should know that there is also the interaction between the maturation and learning. As I was telling you earlier, maturation is due to genes and learning is due to environment. So development is also an interactive aspect of maturation and learning. So maturation is the raw material for learning and determines to the great extent how an individual will grow. Also, development is often predictable because we have been seeing the human beings, how they develop. We know that at what stage they will behave in what manner. So development is predictable to certain extent. That is, we can say beforehand what happens to a child in the age of 12 to 16, for example, how he behaves as an adolescent. From, say, in the old age, how individuals behave. So this actually is because we have been studying about the different stages of development and what are the characteristics associated with those development. We know that development is also interrelated. For example, you consider a child. Now, maybe he's good at sports, or one day he has won a prize in elocution, and some teachers or his parents encourage him. And therefore, he tries to extend that aspect to other types or other fields also, and he tries to develop in other fields also. What I mean to say here is one dimension of development may affect the other. Therefore, this is known as that concept development may be related to some other aspects. Similarly, the sense organs or the feelings may be related to knowledge learning. So when we say the physical development is there, similarly, mental development also occurs. Therefore, one aspect of development also affects the other aspect of the development. So we can say that there are different aspects of memory, learning, reasoning, association, all other mental abilities. And one is triggered, there is a possibility that other fields of, by association, other fields may also develop. Also, there is a direction, especially for motor development. What is motor development? That way the neurons or the bodily brain, the nervous system develops, that is known as the motor development. Motor development is how you actually interact with the skills, how you actually move. The movement is known as the motor development. The human beings, when they exhibit a skill, for example, like dancing or playing cricket, they are showing their motor abilities. That is, the knowledge is there. At the same time, they are going to use their hands, which is again due to the nerve or the muscle control. This is known as the motor development. And we see that the exercise of motor development, when we try to consider the human being when he is born, actually the growth, how it occurs from cephalocaudal. Cephalocaudal means from head, it starts growing the organ. The body, the organism starts growing from the head to the legs. That is, caudal is actually tail, but to the legs. Also, the growth is actually proximo-distal. That is, from the center, it grows outside. So these are the developmental stages. When a human being develops in physically, that is, the growth occurs, the development is cephalocaudal as well as proximo-distal. That is why we see that the children, the lower parts actually grow faster. The control of the upper parts of the body is more faster than the lower parts. Also, when we see the infants gradually use their arms to propel their legs when they try to walk or crawl. Similarly, when we try to see the children try to gain control over their body, their torso, before their extremities, that is legs and hands. So now we know when the infants try to reach for objects, actually, they try to lead their arms or legs. They first try to learn to extend their arms or legs. So here we learn that the organism growth is both cephalocaudal as well as proximo-distal. Also, there is a particular order in which a gradually development occurs. And every stage, developmental stage, has certain hazards. Hazards in the sense, when a child is there, now the mother is worried because it may hurt itself by going away into some unsafer places or going near fire or going near water, etc. Similarly, when an adolescent is there, he also has certain hazards that he may go into depression, or he may go into a fit of anger, or he may lose emotional control, or get used to certain what we call drugs or something like that, and he may spoil his life. Similarly, when an adolescent elderly person is there, when a full grown adult is there, he is possible he may go into depression, or he may not be able to handle the life's problems. Similarly, when a completely grown up person is there, he may also be depressed, or he may not have enough physical agility to deal with his life, or he may be having certain mental problems. So every stage has certain hazards. Now, how can we overcome this? By be able to be undergo the process of adjustment, as well as trying to rationalize, as well as trying to get in equation with the environment. Now, when people are not well adjusted, or when they are poorly adjusted, it is possible that they may face certain hazards. So every developmental stage also has certain hazards. Now we have talked actually about the different aspects of development. Let me actually summarize for you. We know that the development has certain principles, and these developmental principles are: it is a continuous process, it's an orderly process, and it proceeds from general to specific development. Development involves change. Development is a product of interaction with heredity as well as environment. It is unique to individuals. That is why individual differences are seen. Not all individuals are same. There is a principle of maturation, interaction of maturation as well as learning in development. Development is often predictable. We can understand because we have learned enough about development. Therefore, we can say if a person is at one stage, how development occurs in a particular individual. For example, when a child is there, we know that he first sits and then crawls and then tries to stand up. We can understand or predict the stages of development. And we know that there is interrelatedness between one stage of development and another. And we know that one dimension of development affects, or it tries to change the other aspects of development in an individual. Direction also is there in development. For example, there is exercise of control of motor development. The development is from cephalocaudal as well as proximodistal. And also we know that there is a particular orderly sequence in which development occurs, and every developmental stage has certain potential hazards. Now, when we try to understand the stages of human lifespan, we know that there are certain stages in human development. The first is the prenatal stage, right from the birth. That is, from the time they are conceived to they are born. That is roughly around 280 days after conception, or nearly 260 days after conception, for a fetus to become ready to be born. And that is a birth process. So conception occurs when a sperm penetrates the wall of the ripened ovum, forming a zygote. And about 8 to 14 days, the zygote gets attached to the wall of the mother's uterus. This is known as the implantation stage. And here actually there is a prenatal development in which the embryo starts growing till the 3rd week or the end of the 8th week. So from the 3rd week to the 8th week, there's a gradual development. All major organs are formed and the heart begins to beat. And then this is the time where the prenatal, from this time till the 3rd month of the prenatal birth month until the baby is born, we see that the major organs start to function and the growth of the organism is quite rapid. So what I'm saying is the right from the stage of conception to the time they are born, that is known as the prenatal stage. And the postnatal or the neonatal stage is right from the day of the birth to the 14 days. Now, this is a gradual stage where the child has to be taken care and he has to be given warmth and also its requirements, and it has to adjust to the new environment. The infancy, that is from the birth to the, that is the 14th day or the after 2 weeks to the 2 years, is known as the infant. During this stage, actually, the small prenatal period, the baby or the infant tries to prepare itself to the environment and tries breathing, sucking, swallowing, and discharging bodily waste. Now, from birth to 1 month, it displays several reflexes as well as skills, which helps in the process of development. From 2 to 6 years is known as the early childhood stage. And here we see that the sphere of activities start to gradually increase, and the child tries to interact with the environment and with the wider society and tries to learn appropriate social behavior and develops mental abilities. And this is the time when they start the schooling. The middle childhood is the stage where we see a sudden growth. This is from the age of 6 to say 13 years. And we say here the eye, hand, and small muscle coordination starts to develop. The mental capacity starts to increase. The child learns about the concrete objects as well as the events and experiences, and thinking starts to follow. It starts to actually fall into some logical patterns. So here, the try to develop different hypothetical situations, how to behave actually, and they also try to develop abstract thinking to a certain extent, but abstract thinking doesn't start at the age of 13, it starts. So this age is the age where the child tries to logically think to a certain extent and tries to develop some mastery over certain things. There we also have got certain childhood prodigy is actually they try to develop certain particular skills. And adolescence is a period from transition of from childhood to adulthood, and we see a period of significance of human development. And here we see the puberty or the sexual maturation occurring, and the reproductive capacity of the individual starts, and we see rapid biological and physical changes as well as many physiological challenges occurring in them, and they try to accommodate themselves to the new environment. And here there is a rapid spurt of growth. The early adulthood from 19 years to 20-35 years is known as the early adulthood. It can be known as the period where they try to develop, they try to fit into social roles and also relationships, and they try to find themselves as individuals. Now here, the individuals have become fully functioning, and they also try to assume social responsibilities and roles within as prescribed by the society. They try to marry, become family persons, and develop intimate social as well as sexual relationships. The middle adulthood is from the age of 35 to 60 years. And here the people, they are knowing about their physiological limitations as well as their functions. And they also have come to what we call they have the full functioning performance of their muscular as well as the organ system such as digestive circulatory system. It is also characterized by certain dramatic changes in the functioning of the reproductive system and sexual activities. And also we know that the information of short-term memory actually declines with age. But here the long-term memory, it also somewhat declines. Short-term memory does not decline because here they're still functioning a lot. There is wisdom, creativity, they interact more with the people, with society, and there's also proficiency in solving real-life problems, and they become good, wise, and they're fully functioning adults in the middle adulthood. But after some time, these people start growing, the old age creeps in. From the 60 to the last stages of life, it is known as the old age. Here there is deterioration, that is of their bodily organs, as well as there is, of course, now we have there's lot bigger expectancy because of the growing better health conditions or better health facilities provided by governments. But then at the same time, we find the old age occurring from the age of 60 until the time of their death. It is also possible at this stage, they may face certain problems. That is, they may lose a spouse or they may have loneliness. And as when people grow, their metabolism also changes. And we see the wear and tear of the body parts. There's decline in teeth, or there may be a problem of their digestive problems, or there may be heart problems. And also they do not have they have a sense of anxiety, and how well they have led their life. They also have certain emotional and social problems, and they sometimes have a feeling of despair because they are not able to have achieved much in their life, contributed much to the society, and they tell themselves that they have limited lifespan and therefore they have to do something. So here, one of the problems is either their integrity they have, or they may sometimes feel despair. If they have succeeded, then they have the feeling of integrity, or sometimes they may face certain crisis and therefore they may have a feeling of despair. Now, when we actually consider all these development, we know that the changes are there every day. They are slow and noticeable, but we don't notice them because we are so busy with our lives. The changes are always there, either physically or mentally. And development actually goes through certain patterns. So across the lifespan, we develop in all these stages, but these stages actually mean that there is growth as well as development in all these stages. Now, in what some stages, in each stage, a person shows a particular way or the characteristic associated with that stage. Now, a person may show a typical capabilities or behavior or characteristic modes of functioning according to the stage of development. When we talk about the development in early child, for example, a child goes to school. The biological development prepares the individual or the adolescents to the formal education as well as how to manage his family and marriage. But later, schooling, marriage, job, social expectations of individuals from the society, all these will develop different developmental tasks. For example, as a child, you are supposed to study, but as an adolescent, you are supposed to show some responsibility. As an adulthood, when you get into the adulthood stage, you are supposed to show certain features of adults, that is, get married or do a job, etc. Now, all these social aspects are, or actually, they're decrypted or they're given by the society. Now, these different stages of development have different developmental tasks ascribed by the society, and we try to fit in the societal role of mode of societal roles, or as prescribed by the society. Now, we know that the human development, the goals of life have to be fulfilled to the maximum extent. That is, an individual should strive to seek satisfaction in how he is growing. Now, we know that every stage shows some sort of relation with the previous stage of development. And is it possible that an individual can consider himself from one stage to another? Yes, he can actually find himself changing from one stage to another, and there is consolidation of the previous developmental stage and also a preparation for the next stage. And we also know that the growth of brain cells and the physical motor skills, they are more during infancy and adolescence compared to adulthood. Now, there are variation between individuals in the rate of development as well as the progression from one stage to another. How one person progresses from one stage to another may also differ in different individuals. Now, developmental tasks actually motivate individuals to do what the society expects them to achieve and at certain age in their lives. Now, development tasks actually tells individuals what lies ahead for them and what they're supposed to do and what are their expectations. So an individual tries to find fulfillment with himself and also tries to stand by the rules of the society. Now, sometimes we find that all the individuals, because they're not developing to a particular stage, they may lag behind certain other individuals. For example, a child is there. Suppose he is supposed to walk at a particular stage, but he's not walking even if he is reaching 1.5 years or 2 years. Then that is meant to be a developmental lag. How do we know that there is a developmental lag? Because he's not doing the developmental task that is ascribed to a particular developmental stage. So a person is supposed to do certain tasks associated with his developmental stage. Now, if he's not able to do, and there is a lag because of his genetical conditions or health conditions, or somewhat there is a sort of gap that is known as the developmental lag. Sometimes there are also developmental hazards. That is, the growth of a child also means he has to adjust to his environment. So associated with a particular stage are the developmental hazards. Now, we know that there are certain genetical problems associated with genetical lags. For example, if there is a chromosomal problem or a Down syndrome, where there is chromosomal abnormal to the child, he is not able to develop to the extent the other children may develop. Now, this is because of the genetical problems or genetical diseases which are there right from the birth, like Down syndrome, or also there may be some infections in the mother's womb, or there may be certain what we call premature birth. These may also lead to certain problems. Now, it can be reversed through certain interventions or through doctor's advice or through medical treatment. Sometimes they may not be reversible. Now, each development stage has certain hazards, and these hazards, how they overcome them and how they develop, that is the physical, psychological, and environmental hazards are there. So environmental hazards, one mother's parents can protect to a certain extent. The physical hazards and the psychological aspects also should be taken into consideration. I would say now that the developmental psychology is such a study where we study about the growth and developmental aspects of different individuals, the maturation and the learning and the interaction between heredity and environment. We know that there are a certain sequence of biological changes occurring in the individual, and these orderly changes actually, they try to determine how a person grows in a systemic manner. Now, there are certain underlying principles for growth and development, and these actually help the individual to understand what task he has to perform in a particular stage. Although he does not know, the developmental psychologists by themselves understand the different roles that are associated with particular stages of development, and these people can help the individual to reach to certain what we call equilibrium with the environment and do the task and be a healthy and happy individual. Now, I'll be trying to deal with certain the aspects of growth, the theoretical approaches to development. We know that there are certain theories associated with the development. For example, we should know that there are different situations and different conditions which may lead to different types of growth or behavior in persons. We are starting with the behavior actually, how a person behaves, and this is known as the theories of development. We are starting with the psychosexual development theory of Freud. Now, Sigmund Freud is a person who has come from the school of psychoanalysis. He actually tried to understand a person's unconscious drives, his motives and impulses. He says that a person's development is, the psychological development of a person is also related with his sexual development. As you know, a person when he is conceived, there is also a sort of growth in the genital organs of the body. That is, along with the growth, along with the reproductive organelle growth, there is also growth in the individual, there is maturation occurring. And here he says the psychological changes that are seen in an individual are again related to the psychosexual aspects of the individual. Now, Freud believed that a person's childhood actually determines his personality. Freud said that the mind is divided into three parts, that is the conscious and the unconscious and the preconscious. And conscious mind means with what we are aware, what is our mind like when we are awake, that is the conscious. And we know that the preconscious mind is what one is aware to some extent, but it is not completely conscious, whereas the unconscious is completely when we are sleeping or when we are not aware of things, that is unconscious. So the preconscious is somewhere between the conscious and the unconscious. That is a dreamlike stage. Now, the unconscious mind consists of a person's wants, desires, dreams, goals, impulses, motives, etc. Now, we know that a personality of an individual, according to Freud, is because of the three aspects. He talks about id, ego, and superego. What is id? Id is the biological component of personality. Id says that, suppose it is unconscious, of course, but it means it is impulsive and present at birth. It seeks immediate gratification and pleasure and is guided by the pleasure principle. That is, when one is hungry, one tries to reach out to for something to eat. And one has sleep, one tries to immediately sleep. And one feels the sex urge, he immediately tries to somehow control it. So here he says the Eid is our instinctual drives. It is a primary process thinking which tries to for immediate gratification of the need. Now it is the reality, ego is the reality driven component. For example, it tries to rationalize and find out a balance. Now, what is superego? Superego is the moral arm of the personality. For our parents or our elders or our relatives or whatever, the society, whatever is trying to judge you and trying to incorporate the idea of good or bad in the individual, that is formed right from the childhood, is known as the superego. It now tries to control you and tell you what is good or bad. Now, this id, superego, ego are all based, are there in the human consciousness. Now, id, as I will say, looks for immediate gratification. Superego is the controlling thing, and id is the it tries for gratification, whereas superego is trying to control your behavior by saying what is moral and what is not moral, what is good and what is not socially good, etc. Whereas the ego is the thing which is trying to balance both the id as well as the superego. It is the reality driven component of personality, and it says if you are hungry, wait for a minute, look what is possible, wait until you have a right place and right food or right time to eat it, etc. Now, ego is rational and organized. Ego acts as like a mediator and tries to balance id and superego. Now, Freud has also said that people try to protect their ego because the individuals can exist only because of the ego. And now this ego helps the individuals to rationalize themselves with the world and also to cope with certain things. And the ego actually tries to cope with certain things, and he calls them as the defense mechanisms. The psychological mechanisms that are there are, I'll tell you, for example, there are something which has unwanted has happened or negative thoughts have come. One tries to subdue them or repress them. That is one way of trying to protect yourself from the something bad. That is known as repression. Something bad happens and you try to think that it does not exist. You repress the feelings. That is the repression. Sometimes regression, that is they go for an earlier stage of development to deal with unpleasant things or unpleasant feelings or situations. For example, if somebody scolds, a child goes into the room and sleeps. Similarly, even as an adult, if somebody scolds, you go and try to stay alone. That is regression. That is going to an earlier stage of development where the ego tries to comfort oneself. That is, an individual tries to protect himself from the environment or the other aspects of social aspects of anxiety by trying to cope up himself. That is, the individual must exist at all costs. So he tries to protect his ego by different mechanisms. One, as I was saying, is repression. That is trying to forget that a thing has happened. The other is regression. The next is, for example, regression, I'll give another example. A 40-year-old woman who cries and yields when she gets fired from her job. Who actually cries and yields? A small child. Similarly, a 40-year-old woman is doing the same. That is, it is going to the earlier stages of its development. This is also known as regression. Now, projection. Projection is something bad happens, then you say that has happened due to other persons or due to other circumstances instead of focusing it's your own problem. That is attributing wrongly your negative feelings to somebody else or some other person, blaming other person as distrustful. When you are having trust issues, you blame somebody else. That is known as projection. That is, you're trying to project your feelings onto someone else. Then also you have got rationalization. Sometimes you try to understand the things and say, okay, this has happened due to these reasons, and try to justify one's negative feelings or thoughts, and then try to actually avoid the actual reason. That is also known as rationalization. For example, a student who parties a day before exam, telling it is okay to enjoy life than to actually look at the problem or not to tell her friends. Tomorrow there is an exam, but he tries to go and party. He's not telling to others. He's thinking it's okay. Now that is rationalization. And now, although he's trying to rationalize his negative thoughts, actually the consequences of the action will vary. Therefore, when tries to rationalize, it is good, but at the same time, if the rationalization is trying to only put off certain things, it may actually cause the harm. Therefore, you're avoiding the actual reason. That becomes a rationalization. And also we have got a reaction formation. Reaction formation is portraying your feelings or your behaviors opposite of what is actually happening. That is known as the reaction formation. That is, when you actually are angry, you are trying to be polite to others. That is known as reaction formation. That is being overtly polite. That becomes the reaction. Denial is actually not accepting the situation, but then the unpleasant feelings, whatever are there, you say, no, I don't have any problem. That is known as you are trying to divert the negative feelings, and that is known as you're not accepting your feelings. And sometimes you actually say, and you divert the negative feelings to some other object or person. You show your anger to somebody else. If you're angry on your teacher, you show it to somebody else. If you're angry on your parents, you show on someone else. That is known as displacement of emotions. Also, sometimes sublimation. Sometimes people actually, their anger, if they have anger or fear, they try to put it into a proper way and try to actually put into that energy into some other good cause instead of, and they try to put it in an acceptable manner. They try to do certain things. For example, there is a breakup. Somebody breaks up with somebody, and then they try to actually write poetry out of it. That is known as sublimation. So all these are actually how we try to react to certain circumstances so that the ego is there. The ego is protected. The ego acts to, the person's ego has to be there because it helps an individual to understand his reality. The id seeks for gratification. The superego tries to put control, but even the control does not help the individual. As children rebel against their parents on social controls, similarly, the individual also tries to rebel against the moral principles or social principles of morality, and therefore the ego actually, which balances the id and superego in an environment or the consciousness. These three things are existing in the consciousness according to Freud. Freud says these are the three aspects of the consciousness, and therefore the ego is there for all the people, and the ego has to be there because it has to, an individual has to live in an environment, and these different things I was talking about, that is the repression, regression, progression, rationalization, reaction formation, and denial, displacement, and sublimation. These are the various, what we call, defense mechanisms for an individual so that he's able to exist. And Freud also talks about different psychosexual stages of development, and we'll be talking about the psychosexual stages of development, that is how maturation occurs, how the psychological characteristics of a person actually develops. All these are different in different age period because of the sexual development also associated with that period. The thing is, Freud has given very much importance to the aspect of sexual development in psychological development. Now, we know that the Freud is considered as one of the persons who has tried to form psychology actually. No, sometimes he is much prone to criticism from various people, and his theory is actually criticized even now to a certain extent. But then his theory also has had a great impact on the way to understand the human beings, their consciousness and unconsciousness, and how individuals try to protect themselves from the environment and others' reactions, and how they have developed various defense mechanisms. And actually, there is certain truth at the same time, whether it is truth is common to all the societies or all the social or cultural climates is a matter of a debate. But at the same time, we know that he talks about the different stages of development, that is the oral stage, anal stage, phallic stage, latency stage, and genital stage, where we see different characteristics of sexual development, which is linked to the psychological stages of development. And we actually will consider this theory in the next class. We talk about the Freud psychosexual development stages, and then we'll critically evaluate before we go into the emotional development of Kohlberg. We'll be understanding the different developmental theories, that is the intellectual development, the moral development, as well as the social development and the psychosexual development. Different theories we'll be studying, as well as other aspects of lifespan development, that is adolescence and old age in detail. Thank you very much.